Industry speaker talk will be start now. I hope you enjoy your lunch just now. So returning from the break, we'll shift our focus to our industry conference. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Lars Bowman. He was born and raised in Germany and began his career at Volkswagen Wolfsburg in 1980. Alongside with his corporate roles, Lars is deeply engaged in the German Logistics Association, serving in various capacities. Today, we will share his perspective on data space and the role of International Data Spaces Associations. Mr. Lars, the stage is yours.
Yes, so hello to everybody. Great honor for me to be here in this university and to talk to you today. After my presentation, I would be happy if you have a rough idea of what are data spaces and what is the role of the International Data Spaces Organization. But maybe first some words to me. You already heard something. I'm a German, but I don't live in Germany years now. I was 2.5 years in Mexico, and from there we went to Shanghai, China, where we also have been over 2 years. And just recently, some weeks ago, I came here with my wife. The reason for all these changes is I'm always following my wife in her jobs, and she recently took over the managing director here for Volkswagen in Malaysia, and that's the reason why I'm here. I am, as you heard, also an industry veteran of Volkswagen. I started 1980, 43 years ago, and I started as an apprentice for tool mechanic, which means I really learned there. It's the largest automobile plant in the world. I learned there how to mechanically produce cars from scratch, let's say. And then I developed within these 43 years. Some years ago, I was responsible for the IT of production, logistics, and plants worldwide for Volkswagen. So I was traveling a lot, had a lot of international contacts. And during my career, it was always that although I'm a production and logistics guy, I was always interested in IT. And I was always interested in what can you do with IT. So how can you transform data into information? That's the way, how we call it today, or we call it digital transformation. In the 80s, we just called that EDP, electronic data processing. And later, we came to the topic of IT. It was always the same, I would say. It was how can you take data and make information which is valuable for the company. Okay, and during the time when I had this responsibility, the International Data Spaces Association was founded in Germany. Volkswagen was one of the founding members, and I was sent to the board of IDSA to represent Volkswagen there. And the reason why this was founded, let me also maybe say some words to that, was the whole economy of data, the whole business of data. At that time, our perspective in Germany was in the US, this is driven by the big tech companies. The government is outside of that. The university only delivers some knowledge, but the real driving of this business is done by the big companies like Microsoft, like Oracle, like Facebook, and so on. And when we then look to the other side of the world, to Asia, specifically to China, we saw, okay, there the government plays a huge role. The government makes a lot of rules and regulations, And the companies sometimes don't even understand them, and they are afraid to break these rules. So it was totally the opposite. So the idea in Germany was, when we founded IDSA, let's bring a community together of the companies, but also from the government and also from the science, and let's let these three develop the right concept for that. So that was the reason. And now we can go to the first slide. And data economy, we were talking about that involves many players today. It started with data exchange of one-to-one. That started already 10,000 years ago. Some trader offered 2x, another one had also something to exchange. And beyond the information that he has 2x, this is something you can see. But he maybe also told you, okay, these are fresh eggs. They are late yesterday, not 10 days ago. This is data which he can't see. So for the guy who buys the eggs, something is very important. He has to have trust. So he has to believe the guy who sells the eggs, okay, if they're really fresh, then I give you a certain price for that. So that was maybe the first data exchange. And if you transform that to today's world, we still have one-to-one data exchanges. This is, for example, when I'm driving here in Kuala Lumpur in my car, and a policeman stops me, he will check whether I have the right driving license. And there are rules and regulations. So there is a law which says he is allowed, he's a policeman, he's allowed to check that. And there are also regulations which kind of driving license you have to have. We will later come to that when we talk about the concept of data sovereignty. So the next stage was closed community data sharing few to few. So let's say company A and company B started making some data exchange. Now comes company C. A and B trust C, so C comes into the game and you have a small community to exchange data. But this is not the real world of today. The real world of today is you have many, many, many players involved. And for that, you not only need trust, you also need some kind of ecosystem which enables that this business really can take place. So therefore, we have that data space approach. And that means a decentralized and a dynamic ecosystem with many-to-many interactions needs some kinds of rules and regulation and some kinds of architecture. And data spaces are these architecture. Excuse me. So with data spaces, you rely on a federated data architecture, which is the IDS reference architecture model. And important here, it is no physical data integration. You leave the data where it is, you only exchange the data. I talk today to many people who are afraid to give their data to a big data pool, like Facebook, for example. You have a photo of yourself when you went to school, you put it on Facebook, and it stays there forever, and 10 years later somebody can show you, hey, this was you 10 years ago. So people are afraid of that when they give their data for a specific purpose, later somebody else misuses it for another purpose. And the other thing which is very important is the interoperability. No silos, no vendor dependency today. And you also want to make sure that you only deal with trusted participants. And at the end, data sovereignty and data traceability is very important. And my best example, how I can explain what does that really mean, data sovereignty? I mean, that means that you yourself are in control of your data. You can decide what to show and what not to show. If there are rules, you have to show something, then you can do it. But maybe you don't have to give that away. So if we take that example back, the policeman, he has to check whether you're allowed to drive a car. So you can show him your driving license and he can check that, but you only show him. your driving license, and then you take that back. So you're at every point of the interaction, you're in control of your data. When you, like me, many years ago in Mexico, you live there, and then a policeman checks your driving license, he takes it, and then he waits until you give him something in cash, and then he gives it back to you. But what he also can do is he can make a copy of it and give it to an automobile manufacturer and say, this guy has a driving license, so maybe you can make some advertisement to him to buy a car. And this is maybe something you don't want. So data sovereignty really means at every point of time in the interaction, you're in control of your own data, and you can decide what happens with your data and what not. Okay, and we were talking about data ecosystems. So in these data ecosystems, you also have to have a balance between the advantages and maybe the concerns you have. So a concern could be data ownership and data sovereignty. Am I really still the owner? Data security. In this interaction, is it really sure that nobody can break into that interaction? And also one thing which becomes more and more important, what is the value of data? How can you estimate the value of data? And the chances are that you would come into interoperability. Data exchange would really be possible. You could come more and more in the sharing economy. So it's not necessary that everybody owns his assets. You can also share and make a better use, better efficiency out of that. And you can provide data-centric services. And this is what IDS, with its architecture and its rule book, wants to achieve. So this is already, the idea is already almost 10 years ago. Today, in this association, there are already 147 members. Small companies, big companies, organizations like universities, also other associations like logistics associations, for example. And out of these 147 members, there are more than 860 people who are really contributing, because this is something where voluntary work of the members, everybody works together, for example, to develop the rule book. And these members are also, meanwhile, in 28 countries. These are not all countries of the world, and it's still Europe-centric, I would say, but we are already in a stage to go abroad. I can later show you. So this is more or less the talk about data spaces. The International Data Spaces Associations, what is their role in that? The responsibilities are coordination of all the activities of the community to enable the co-creation of the guidelines, which in the sum are called the IDS standard. Once you have this standard developed, you need to keep it somewhere. So it's the management of the repositories, the functional specification and the technical documentation, for example. And all of that is based on open source. So this is not software development where the software is sold then by somebody. This is really open source and available to everybody. And the third role is the community management. So you have to call for the meetings, you have to enable the networking, the matchworking, and you have to also assure that the strategic alignment develops further, and for that you need working groups and some organizational structure. And all of that leads to the magical triangle, which is circling about the point of trust. On one hand, we have the IDS reference architecture, which is a blueprint for the data spaces. It has detailed specifications. Then there is already a portfolio of open source building blocks, which you can download and use in your data space. And there's also a certification scheme, and there are also responsibilities for certification. So that means if an IT company offers a connector on the market and you can buy it from them, it has to be certified first before it can go into this IDSA ecosystem. And today we have already the data space protocol 0.8. There is a huge working group who was working 2 years on that. That's a really an important asset which brings the intra and inter-data space interoperability by separating the control from the data plan. So the control plan can be recognized the layer for decision making, and the data plan can be considered the layer for the action making, so for the real execution. And separating that makes data sharing more modular and easy, and but can be combined practically. So this means this protocol supports the data transfer requirements, such as streaming, for example, or enables the data spaces from different sectors and countries to communicate with each other and embodies data sharing standards and best practices also. And this picture shows a little bit what is the vision of the data spaces and what you can see. There are two main roles. One is the data provider, somebody who can offer data or information, and the data consumers. And the interaction between them is over the IDS connectors. So you can use certified connectors, can be from different IT companies. And within the data space, the exchange happens. But there is no storage of the data. This is no cloud. So you only send the data, and what you need for that is you need a vocabulary to make sure that you are talking about the right things. You need an identity provider, so only trusted participants are allowed to participate in the ecosystem. There is an app store, so not everybody has to develop the same software over and over again, which is already there, can be shared via an open space. And there is also a clearinghouse, which is an organizational entity which comes into place when there is a conflict. And also brokers can participate in the data ecosystem, so if you need public data or something which is available on the market, this can be facilitated by a broker. So that shears to sum that all up. This is a global system to build the data spaces and ensure the data sovereignty. The IDS core is, this is where all the assets where the data spaces come from, like the rule book and the certification schemes and others is available and built and maintained by the members. And the next step is the adoption. So you have to adopt that to your own use case, for example, for the automotive industry, data space for the automotive industry. And finally, once you adopted it, you are in an IDS ecosystem. So these are the 3 levels. And to see what is already there, this was all theory talk, I would say, up to now. To see what is there, there is a data space radar, and that tracks the companies who work already with data spaces based on the IDS standard, according to the domain and according also to the development stage, how far are they with their data space. And this radar gives an overview who is adopting the IDS standard and how. And this also enables experts to discover and support consortia ready to invest in implementing their solution. There is a link where you can access this. All of that, what I'm talking about, is publicly available. There's a lot on YouTube and also on the webpage of IDS to see that. And here is the data space radar. These are 136 total entries at the moment. 37 73 use cases with 63 databases of the different areas: supply chain, agriculture, health, energy, manufacturing, and also my topic, automotive. We have the Catena-X data space, which is the most prominent example at the moment. And all of that can also be read in a report, which comes once a year, where you can see what is the data spaces. The data spaces radar is online, so you can see that in real time. But once a year, you also get a report on the data connectors, which are available and where you can get them. These are some prominent companies like Solidity, for example, or also T-Systems, a German company, where you can buy such connectors. And I said, up to now, it was more and more Europe-centric, but 2 years ago, the discussion already started, how can we bring that further of Europe out to the world? And then, in addition to the hubs, IDSA hubs, which already existed in Europe, we have now more and more hubs and competence centers and also labs in other countries of the world. I was, as I said, the last 2 years in China, and I was involved in setting up the IDS research lab there in Shanghai. And we are also in the process to set up hubs there in China, but finally Malaysia is quicker than China in that place, because tomorrow here at the same place, I understood, we will have the opening of the Malaysian IDSA hub, which is facilitated by the Digital Connect Society. So in total, let me see, I have some figures here. I can see that I have somewhere summing up of all these hubs and competence centers, but I don't have it in my head. Okay, so let me finish with my last words here. Data sharing is better than playing alone. I hope this was a little bit clear throughout the presentation. And as I said, I'm living now since some weeks here in Malaysia. My wife and I, we already moved into our apartment 2 weeks ago, so now I'm ready. After hanging up all the pictures on the wall, I'm ready also to answer questions and to work on our topic here in Malaysia. Thank you very much.
It is now for our Q&A sessions. Any questions from attendees?
Thank you very much for the talk. So you mentioned a lot about how you're going to share the information between all of the companies. So have you managed to get the thoughts and go through all of the different regulations already for the data sharing and all that?
Well, this is a process which was more or less in parallel. I know I was personally involved in a great use case, which is already some years old. This was between the German companies Volkswagen, my company, and ThyssenKrupp, who is a company who provides steel for Volkswagen. And we made a great use case for the supply chain of that steel delivery to Volkswagen. And at that time, there were not all the rules and regulations in place, and there was also only one connector which can be used. But during that pilot project, also we got a lot of valuable information which led into, which were flowing into the development of the rules and also of the further connectors. So this is a process which is more or less in parallel. But I would say I can't evaluate that technical from my point of view, and I'm out of Europe, like I said, already some years now. But I really believe we have now everything in place, so things have to be further developed for sure, and you will always have newer versions. But today you have a set of things where you can really start and be productive.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If there is no questions from attendees, thank you, Mr. Lars, for his insightful speech on data spaces and the role of IDSA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, a warm welcome to Mr. Ng Shen Yan, Principal Consultant from Scenic Consulting Sdn Bhd. Today, he will share his unique perspective on what do you get when you mix an IT developer and an accountant. Mr. Ng, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. I hope no one's sleepy after lunch. So we're trying to keep it very lively over here. So thank you, Mr. Lars. So I think Mr. Lars gave a very good illustration on the data as an overview over here right now. So I'm going to come from a different perspective right now in terms of data practitioners. So this, well, spoiler alert, this leads to become the data practitioners, right? So he goes through that, yes, data is coming, but who actually feeds in the data coming through? So topic about here is that what do you do when you get mixed up, when you mix an IT developer and an accountant in the part? So, slide here. So generally, right, you've got two different classes of very different students or profiles of people. You've got the programmers, who are the coders, and you've got the accountants, who are the counting people over here. And I guess with the different faculty members over here, I'm not sure how frequent your programmers or your IT people talk with the accounting faculties. You guys ever mix? Not at all, right? Two totally different groups of people, different personalities and part. Cool? So generally, if you look at it, right, your programmers, developers, their language is different. It's got algorithms, workflows, flowcharts, table structures, primary keys, API integration, while your accountants will talk about balance sheets, income statements, cash flows, costing, trial balance, auditing. These two people don't talk. Generally, correct, right? In the part, right? So it's basically French and English between the two of them over here. And generally, that language is very hard between the two parts in the area. So generally, how do you combine two of them? It's totally different world. It's like basically oil and water coming in contact, they do not mix. But do they really mix? That's the first question. So generally in the part, in what I do as a quick background, so spoiler alert as well, I think my fellow counterpart talking is also in the ERP industry. Hello, in the part. So we are actually ERP consultants. So this is actually a very specialized role where you've got two different, well, you've got a single role which basically combines the developers and the accountants into one. So it's a very specialist kind of role where you've got a person who can do programming but still understand the core basic fundamentals of accounting. So it's a very specialized skill set which will go into two parts over here, right? So you've got a person who can tell you about balance sheet, then we'll try to figure out how to grab the data again from the accounting perspective or how a company runs and try to develop it in the system over here. So there's generally this skill sets that's available, which is where we have the combination of two parts over here in terms of the ERP consultants in this area over here, right? So if you look at it, right, what do they really do in terms of ERP consultants? How do you match this part? So generally as an ERP consultant, we are actually data practitioners linked to it. We actually go through the digital transformation of companies over here. So generally in companies, right now, they are either running very manual or they're running in very silo systems. Data segmentation is what you have. Sometimes data are captured manually, they then have to transform it, or it's done in Excel files, then they have to re-enter in the part. So generally where we come in this part of here as ERP consultants is, we will basically go through in looking through an overview of business operations. So that's where the ERP consultants comes in and says, okay, to run a business, you generally have got all these over here right now. So on the left side, you've got your customers, which will feed you data, right? They get their orders, their demands, their requirements, what they want, the historical orders that they have purchased from the company, their complaints that comes through. So in the square box, what we have in the middle is generally how a business operation runs, right? So you've got your sales and marketing team, you've got your planning, your demand planning, your projects, your inventory systems, your procurement to fulfill the orders in the bulk, right? And if you do manufacturing, that's when you have got your raw materials, your production process, your finished goods process, how you fulfill that to the customers going through the inventory. And generally, as the business comes through, you have to make money, right? That's the core source of company over here. So for each different stages over here, the companies have to calculate at each stage where the cost comes in. That's where the accountability comes in. Now, through all this whole process, there is so many data flow points and integration it goes through with the vendors. So you tell the vendor is, hey, I need this, do you guys have this? If you have, how much does this cost? And you tell you, hey, it's in US dollars, and US dollars is ridiculously high right now versus ringgit. So then you have to convert into your forex exchange and so forth. So generally, this is where the flow comes in, where the ERP consultant is supposed to then advise a company to try to fit from the customer's demands to what you can get in terms of supplies as two ends over here. Now, to make it even more complicated, this is where everything comes in. So in each process over here, you have sub-processes within the state of a company. So you've got your quotations, your sales quotations, your sales orders, your sales invoices, and each of these sub-processes have got complications on how you match everything in terms of synchronization. So you look at the process of a company, it's basically trying to run an orchestra of different departments, making sure things runs perfectly and in synchronicity to make sure that it delivers one end to the other. So running a business is not easy. Get people to work together, if it's even harder when it's different departments itself. So where the ERP consultants comes in the part is then to engage with the stakeholders of the company. So you try to talk business language with them, right? In terms of gross profit, inventory ability, talking about how much it costs, unrealized gains, realized gains, forex loss, forex gains in the part. And that's where the ERP consultants will process those data, make sure it's encapsulated correctly in the table structure where the ID guy comes in and to bring in the data sources. So we, as an ERP consultants, will actually map through all these flows, make sure we translate business requirements, make sure it's getting done properly in the data structure required and in the system to capture in this part of here. So that's where primarily the role of the ERP consultant comes in. It's a mixture of two. It's a very unique structure of what we do as an entity itself, right? So if you look at the process of where the role of ERP consultant comes in, this is where we go through. So there's a process of the ERP consultant going through as an analyst. So we will talk to businesses, find out what their key problems are. We solve business problems, but in order to solve a business problem, to analyze it, we would then have to design it in the IT structure or processes, tools that we have, grabbing the data, feeding the data. That's where the development stage comes in. When you feed the data, when we have to deploy the system, as in when we deploy the system, we get the customers to test it, they say, does it fit and solve their business problems primarily in the part, and that's when they execute the system in the part, and that's where the data starts feeding in, and the data analytics comes in through the part. So there's also an axiom that says, right, rubbish in, rubbish out in terms of data. So you can have a lot of data, but it's unmeaningful data, it's useless, or next to useless. So in the predicator of where we come in as ERP consultants, we have to make sure that the data is clean, the data is accurate, data is timely, the data is correct. That's the role as we come in. And we have to make sure that when data comes in, we have to make sure it's also captured properly as well in the area, right? So as an ERP consultant, trying to go through all this process, again, engaging with stakeholders, and usually when you talk to people, business people, they don't care about how many codes or lines code you do, validation, data flow. It's not on that. They just want the result. So that's where the consultants comes in and to make sure they achieve the results by making sure that the development and the data process is correct. So that's the role, right? So it's a very unique role where you basically have to think multi-language. One is a business language, then try to figure out how to do that in the IT perspective and deliver that back into the business processes. So it's a very unique process of where this function or this person or this entity that comes in is a combination of basically the development of programming and as well as financials. So that's what you get when you mix the two of them together in the area over here. Yeah. So quick part as a process of where I'll go through. So the question is that how do we get this person over here, right? Do you start as an accountant or you start as a programmer first to enter the spaces over here? So there is no fixed rule that you have to graduate from accounting and programming. So a bit of sharing, right? I started my core under degree is actually in finance, right? I've got no degree in programming, and actually I run the company primarily. So where did I get my programming or IT knowledge from? It's actually from playing games, right? So last time I will be scolded by my mom, was playing computer games. Says, you will never earn a living from playing computer games. I proved her wrong today, in part of it, right? So it's a skill set, right? So I studied a finance degree, then I picked up programming, database design, using Access, so you primary key, understand multi-structures over there, and it started from there. So that's where you fit in a part. So the question then is, if someone's interested, how do I get there? Where do I start? From where we do right now, we actually do take from an accounting degree or accounting experts, and we do train them from the programming side. Or alternatively, we also take programmers and try to teach them accounting. Either side, you get different skill sets of where they come from. You do get them. Some has got better skill sets than the others. It do match in the part of that. But usually what we find easier is actually getting the accounting person and training them up to be a table structure, right? Then you then get the programmer to engage with them and develop the part. But it's doable from two perspectives. You don't need to hunt from one side to the other part. So that's an example. So the question then number two is that, is this for me? Am I interested? If I'm interested, how do I do about this? So generally for this job engagement for an ERP consultant, it's also you need to be have a degree of EQ, right? To be able to wanting to talk to customers or talk to people, you cannot be very introvertish in the part. So this is where a lot of key engagements with the external parties is. You have to understand them, you have to feel them, you have to see what's being said but not said with the customers. So a quick note, as a very tidbit, very interesting. Malaysians make very good ERP consultants in this region, right? Comparatively to Singaporeans. I hope there's no Singaporeans in the crowd. Okay. Okay. So the question is why, right? We Malaysians are unique because we speak at least 2 to 3 languages in the part. So we speak Malay, we speak English, and in my role over here, we do a lot of it primarily, which is we deploy systems in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Philippines, Vietnam. So in the Malaysian context, we fit a very good role where we are very multi-skilled, we're very we're very adaptive in terms of Malaysians, right? And we fit around the region, we adapt very well. Then the question is, why won't the Singaporeans fit that well? Okay, the Singaporeans, they do speak languages, but they're not as multi-skilled as us. We speak at least additional one more language, number one. Number two, in terms of Malaysians, we tend to be a bit more adventurous. So if you say, hey, I've got a project for you in Vietnam, you got a lot of Malaysians who raise their hands up and say, I'm very interested to go there. Or we got projects in Indonesia. Malaysians tend to like to go out to explore, right? In regards to, again, for the Singaporeans, their preference would be tend to go to your higher countries, right? Your Australias, your UK, the US. In terms of the region over here, they will tend not to be interested so much to go to a developing country per se. So that's what I found is that for Malaysians, this actually fits them very well. It's a very exploratory, a very adventurous role where you talk to people of different cultures. We tend to be better, to more adaptive to the culture from other sides, especially in this region over here. So if you're interested, if you are a developer or an accountant and you want to explore the world, this is probably a good, interesting starting point for you as well in the part. So that's the second part in terms of a bit of sharing in this space. The third one is that no, if it's interesting, how long does it take me to be an ERP consultant? Or can I call myself an ERP consultant to be a data practitioner in this part of here? The general part is that for you to be a seasoned or experienced ERP consultant, you probably need to have 3 or 4 projects under your belt, right? You have to do what I call 3 or 4 full cycle projects. That's where you probably have experienced 80% of what are the challenges of project that comes in and you go through. So this is the part of, getting yourself deep in, experience-wise, seeing what you can do, and get a bit of battle scars, that's what I call it, to experience the pain, before I call myself an ERP consultant. Now, effectively, there's 2 parts over here. Whether is it a job or a career, it really depends for data practitioners such as you guys, right? So, based on our engagement with Utah, I think we've actually worked with Utah since 2014, and we actually took in interns since 2014, so that's nearly 10 years from now. And from what we've gathered, there will be, based on the ratios, right, as we took in the interns will have a taste of what this is like, and they will see that, are they interested? 50% will be a drop-off where they tasted it, they see, okay, it's not something what I want, and then 50% says, hey, actually I'm interested, and they then take it on to go more deep into a career. So this is a very project-based oriented kind of job. It's not a operational where everything's the same, every month the same. Every day is a different experience. They're talking to different people, different issues that comes in. So generally, this is the part of what you can do in terms of the ERP consultancy part, in the area. So again, that's an overview of what we do when you combine a programmer and a financial person generally in the area, right? So I'm open the floor to questions if anyone has any questions. Just to give a bit more incentive of asking questions, whoever asks questions, there will be a prize that you will get as well. So yeah, that's a bit more incentive for you guys, right? So feel free to ask any questions if anyone has. Yeah.
Afternoon again.
Afternoon.
So similar question as previously. So like when you have all these companies and all of them trying to collect their data, trying to bring all of them together, right? How do you actually balance all of the MOUs and MOAs what they're actually willing to share, and how to get it all timely to each other, like it might not be updated, things like that. So do you have any experience with this?
So if you look at it, we do, but actually the concern of what we have in terms of data is actually compliance and data security. So I think in terms of where companies comes in, right, you've already got now a lot of data breaches. Someone just said Telecom Malaysia's data was all, breached out. So I'm just sitting on the other side of the coin, where yes, companies do generate the data, but they will actually use the data for their own usage. In terms of interoperability for sharing, they will not share unless required necessary, right? So this is the realities of life, right? In terms of the data, for the ERP side, as we do it, right, we are actually effectively generating data all the time for a company. So as a company runs, we're feeding data from so many sides. You've got customers' requests, you've got customers' orders, you've got forex rates, you've got right now the issues that's being faced is shipping costs. With the Red Sea, the Houthi issues, right? So those kind of costs keeps escalating or fluctuating so much. So companies actually streaming the data, and the data part of the job that we do is we have to make sure that data accuracy is there, right? Data safety is there as well. Again, data breaches, the ransomware, data security, we are also facing that at the present moment. So we sit on the other side of the coin is to, yes, you need to have data gathering, data analytics, but to make it interoperative for external parties is something companies tend to have second thoughts. I'll be very transparent in the part. They will not give unless it's necessary. That's number one. So I think the key challenge right now will be, as you guys have heard, the Malaysia Mine invoice that's coming in the 1st of August. So all companies more than 100 million has to comply by 1st of August to do e-invoicing. So that's mandated by the government that now they have to share their sales data in an indirect way with the government for taxation. So companies are now gearing up to submit that kind of data as what is mandated and required. So the system actually helps to automate this process over there. So data, we sit on their side. We have to make sure we comply to customers. We have to protect their data from ransomware. We have to protect the data from hacking. So the other side we're calling for data.
So enough process to get them to be compliant after all, pay for labor, stuff, all of them.
Okay, so the realities of life is this, yeah? There's two parts of compliance, okay? This is the legal compliance for companies. Everyone has to cross that hurdle, right? But there's also the best practices and benchmark to whether you keep this part of it in the mark. This benchmark for data compliance keeps going up and up. It's a marathon. There's no ending point. So if you are data practitioners, this keeps going up. Why do I say that? It's because, again, you've got different standards, number one. Number two, you've got risk of data that keeps coming in. So you've got ransomware, you've got social engineering, people try to grab your data as much as possible. The realities of life is that there's also breaches. We've got breach in data, then how do we protect what's gone out in advance, right? So we are more like, we generate data, we're data practitioners, we also need to learn to defend the data that we have as well. So it's a two sides coin. Okay. Good question. You get a Toblerone. Yeah, that's a good incentive to have. Oh no, you deserve it, you earn it. Any questions for all? No further questions? We still got a lot more to give. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sure you're very competitive in the industry. My name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
I used to live in New Zealand, but lately I re-migrated from New Zealand to Malaysia. I like to say that I do have a IT firm. It's quite large. I mean, middle size in Malaysia, giving me some consultancy job or I outsource and write programs for me. For example, I'm in multi-level marketing, network marketing. I need certain program that can help me to escalate my sales. So I go and see my friend's company. Surprisingly, most of the programmers or some of your staff who are more in programming, whether they're blockchain or whatever, they are very good in their area. But you come to marketing, they know next to nothing. Marketing. So it's a bit sad. So how do you marry the two? You were talking to us about marrying the programmer with the accountant. That's fine. But what about marrying your programmer with the marketing, oriented staff who can, for example, think of various channels of sales distribution to perhaps enhance the requirement or the rollout of your client service product services. So meaning you were talking about accountants, that's good. What about marketer? How do you marry the programmer with the marketer?
Okay, thank you, Michael. So fun fact, New Zealand is the most undemocratic country in the world. Why is that? You got 60 million chiefs and 3 million people. The chiefs don't get to vote, right? Okay, so that's a very interesting. So right now you're talking about programming and marketing, correct? So there's actually another space, or what we call it, right? So this is an ERP space. There's actually another one called the CRM space, the customer relationship. CRM, That's correct.
Correct, CRM.
CRM. So the CRM space is where then we marry the programmer with marketing or sales or customer service specialist. So there's actually another domain specialist. If there's another session, we will then have how do you marry a programmer and a marketing person and what do you get? That will be the marketing space over here. So going back is, there are another domain specialty under CRM which fits the programming with the marketing domain expertise. That's number one, yeah? Number two, right now. So you're saying right now is that how then does that help companies in the business? So there's actually a key term right now called omni-channel or multi-channels. So that's already been done right now, where if you have got, so I'll give you an example, yeah? A lot of companies right now does what they call e-coms, right? So electronic comms channels over here. So all the things right now, if you're larger companies, when you do purchases from Shopee, Lazada, their own websites, all those orders are instantaneously hit directly back to the system over here. So in the space, it's very interesting, yeah? So when you even logged in, for example, let's say Shopee or Lazada, there is a data matrix that gets captured when you come in, how long you stay in a page, right? And how long you go through before you drop off to another site itself. So that data is already being collected in the backend in the site. So if you do a sale, you will then process, you will see how long you take the sale and what are your payment channels. That's number one. If you go to the shopping cart and you drop off at the shopping cart, Now you effectively get an email to remind you, dear Michael, you forgot this in your shopping cart. You like continue the pursuit. That's all the data that's been collected back end. You just don't realize it in the past. So they also capture in terms of what devices you come in. Is it a mobile device? Is it a laptop device? What browser type? Is it an iOS browser? Is it an Android browser? So that kind of data effectively does the analytics of you. So, okay, so this is a broad base, yeah? So if you come in from an iOS browser, Safari browser, from an Apple kind of device, straight away we segmented to know what kind of purchasing profile you are. Versus if you are from an Android, which version of Android, then I know what kind of Android devices you are, then I know what kind of profile you have. So that kind of data is already at the moment captured within the CRM from the sites that you go through. And that then tracks back to say, based upon your phone number, if you usually that's why when they logged in, they ask for an email or phone number, we then can track whether were you a recurring purchaser, what have you bought for, how frequent you bought for. So that data is now being captured in the part. So here's the interesting part right now, right, which some companies are going through. So insurance does it very well. So the insurance companies will be saying is that you buy a life policy, for example, right, insurance policy, by 3 years, you should have gotten a notification to try to upsell it to new additional coverages, right? So insurance companies does that very well, number one. Number two, credit card companies also does it very well. So in the sense is that if they see your spending and they know how much you spend, your frequency of payment, you don't overdue, you pay on time, you get a lot of calls, right? They say, hey, would you like to take a loan on call? Again, those data is being generated based upon your spending patterns, your payment patterns, what you buy, where you spend, in-country, out-country, retail, electrical, high-end goods. It's all being generated at the moment. You're just not aware of it. So yes, there is people who marries marketing and programmers. It's the CRM space.
Yeah, correct. I should have said CRM. That's good. Thank you. Well said.
Thank you. Well said. And you earned it overall, Michael. Well done.
Thank you.
5 more minutes. Any questions? And we've got Toblerone to give away.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, you can ask any questions. Even what time is it now? You still get a Toblerone. No further questions? All right. Yes.
So I'm from Thailand. So
Sawadee krap.
Sawadee krap. And you know that I like to get a Toblerone.
Malaysian is different from Thailand Toblerone, yes.
In Thailand, we have a debate now about ERP. In fact, we don't really have a lot of money to invest in digital. And we just got like 5 to 10 years ago that we be able to afford ERP in higher education. Now we have discussion and debate whether ERP of open source like Odoo and the proprietary like Microsoft SAP. Do you have any suggestion on that? Maybe a little technical?
It's not technical, it's a very good question actually. Okay, so there's 2 schools of thoughts, right? You have your open source ERP. In regards to your open source ERP, Open ERP, Odoo, and those stuff, right? So the perception it's cheap or freer because it's open source, correct? And you've got your Microsoft and SAP which are more expensive in the past. So I'll give you an illustration, yeah? So if you look at it, right, your SAPs, your Microsoft ERP, so we take them as cars as an example. So those cars will be your BMWs, your Audis, your Toyotas cars. They're a bit more expensive, but there's a reason it's there, right? It works, it runs. Now, if you take an open source, it's free, number one. So your free will be probably a car, let's say Seat, okay, from Spain. The car is free because of a reason in the part. The only problem is that when you have a Seat car, which is not common in this part of the world, you then have a problem with getting parts, getting support. When things happen, you do not know who to turn to, right? And if that kind of conditions, right, you then find only very limited people to support the system. Even though it's free, the ability, it's economics, right? Supply, demand. There's not many people who can do it, so you've got small supply. If a lot of people use open source, there's high demand. So actually your total cost of ownership is what we call it, right? Actually gets more expensive. You might call the guy and the guy is not available because he's supporting 50 other customers, right? Then you drop down and the cost gets increased. That's where my experience with open source is, number one. Number two, there's also a perception from companies, right? Because it's open source, therefore it's cheaper or freer. So you do not allow the company to reinvest their skill sets or hire more people to support them. You will start out very nice. First 2 years is fantastic. But the moment you need more support, you need to grow the system, you need to expand the system, there's no ecosystem to help you do that, right? If you then take the other perspective of your Microsoft ERP, your SAP ERPs, it's expensive, granted, but that's a reason why you pay for this. Generally, it's because they provide ongoing support, they provide ongoing upgrades, and they provide ongoing technology increments. So as you know, right, technology always has an up cycle of 4 years, where there's always a growth, the next thing comes in. You have IoT, you've got mobility apps at a point in time. Right now, you've got data connectivities, right? You've got things that comes in. So these companies actually invest the money to actually help you run that part. So it could be more expensive in day one, but if you look at the total cost of ownership over time, it actually gets cheaper. So again, right, if you look at the basis right now, in your university, what kind of graduates, what kind of programming language do you teach? Is it more .NET or is it more Java, right? You look at the basis. My bet is that you probably got more .NET programmers in your course. You probably have Java, but it's not as big substantials. So if you look at your university graduates that go in, your flow of resources which will support you are primarily the .NETs, which should probably support the Microsoft side in the part. So in terms of open source, Ruby on Rails, right? You've got those. Do you train them? Not really, I would suspect. So you don't have the flow of resources to support open source going forward. So you could be cheap to start with, very expensive to maintain going forward in the part. Thank you. Enjoy the tomorrow. Okay, time for one last question. Any last questions?
Very good afternoon.
Good
I'm
afternoon.
Dr. Pradeep from India. So, though I'm not belong to management and engineering, I am a sports scientist. So, as you said regarding how the programmer can be married with the accountant, and in reply to the professor's question, you also discuss about how the programmer can be married with the marketing, the CRM, and all those things. So, my question is how we can incorporate this, because nowadays sports management is also coming into the boom, and that there are so many organized people are we have a lack of, especially in India, we have a lack of people of organizing the events. So that's what sports management is always in the demand. People from engineering, like after completing the engineering, they're going to MBA in sports management and all those things. And as we are dealing in the sports, like main purpose of the sports scientists is how to enhance the performance of an sports, dealing with that. So we are also dealing with the data in terms of sports psychology, in terms of sports physiology, in terms of sports biomechanics. So how we can incorporate that artificial intelligence or a programmer in predicting the performance of the performance. Because nowadays we are available with a muscle biopsy that is very costly to predict to go for a talent identification in terms of sports. So how we can incorporate this into the sports science so that we can come out with we can predict these sports performances, and we come out with some kind of strategy to manage the sports personnel. This is my query. Like, this is a kind of applied and apart from the but how we can go for that? Because as we are also dealing with the data, so we are also completely depend upon the data. Because on the basis of data only we can predict the future performance that particular athlete is going to give their best in that particular upcoming Olympics, upcoming Commonwealth Games on the basis of certain data. So how to incorporate this programmer into and then again marrying the programmer with the sports sciences. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not an expert, I have to admit, I'm not an expert in sports area in the part over there, right? But to my knowledge, right, so it's an example, right, we'll take example All Blacks, from New Zealand, right? World famous rugby team, right? Pretty good. They just didn't win the last 2 World Cup, but that's a different story. So those sports science people, they actually have got very good criteria. They really know what they do. So I think in terms of the All Blacks, what they do is they do measure what they call muscle twitching, right? How fast a muscle responds. So not all humans are made equal. Some have better muscle twitch. That's why they are athletes. They respond better. Number one. They also do know to do, I think, tests like the Bronco runs, right? To measure fitness level, recovery rates. Like actually, all those data are there. It's just that's not encapsulated or captured in a structured format for analytics purposes in that area. So in that area expertise, I do not have that, but actually you really have that data. You probably need to work with a team to actually be able to get those data in a structured format or unstructured for that matter to begin with. So your question is actually 2 parts, right? If I've got data, how do I make it effective? So you need something to capture that part. That's number one. Right now, there's also OpenAI, ChatGPT, right? That's also coming very strongly as well. That allows you to also do unstructured data. So the high level part is that create a data storage, chart whatever data you have, PowerPoints, Excel sheets, studies, reports into this container. You enable the ChatGPT, you should be able to ask it questions, and it should be able to give you insights if you know how to ask the correct questions. So that's could potentially be another path for you to explore in a part of that, yeah. Cool. All right, thank you. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. I've exceeded my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ng. We kindly request you to remain on the stage as you move forward with the token of appreciation giving session. It's now my distinct pleasure to invite Associate Professor Dr. Chew Wan Yok, accompanied by Dr. Chang Kai Ming, to present the token of appreciation to Mr. Ng in acknowledgement of his invaluable contributions as an industry speaker for our conference today. Thank you, Mr. Ng. Before you leave the stage, we will be honored if you would kindly remain for a group photo with other industry speakers later. Moving forward, we would like to extend our appreciation to Mr. Lars Bowman. Mr. Lars, may we invite you to receive the token of appreciation for your substantial support and contributions as an industry speaker for our conference today. Thank you, Mr. Lars. Now, I would like to invite all of you to have a group photo together for this invaluable moment. Thank you, everyone. You may now return to your seat. For your information, to all participants, speakers, and also our invited guests, our final year project showcase voting session will be occur at the ground floor of the auditorium, TTSS building. So now we will take a short break until 3 p.m. Later, we will start our academic conference parallel sessions in seminar room 1B and 1C outside the auditorium. The schedule is available on the source board outside the auditorium. Please enjoy yourself. Please go and attend the FYP showcase at the ground floor of TTSS. Thank you everyone.